Welcome back, everyone. Let's get going. We have the Great Roman Civil War. Of course, let's get into it and let's get back to where we were. Uh, basically, what's his name? Pharnaces. Pharnaces really didn't do much on this one. I'm getting ahead of myself. How y'all doing? Of course, I'm the novice historian. I hope you guys are doing good. This is our part 3 in the Roman Civil War. We saw part 1, which was really the siege of Alexandria, which of course this entire video, this documentary, which is like 3 hours long that we're reacting to, it's kind of like part 2 in the Civil War, because we already did part 1 with like a 2 hour whenever, Caesar crossed the Rubicon and everything happened. But anyway, Pharnaces, Pontus, they really couldn't do much against Caesar here, so they got routed. And now you pretty much got a, this is where we left off right here. I came, I saw, I conquered. So now you have Caesar basically taking care of business in Asia Minor in 5 days, and he's got to now move westward, because you got a handful of things. You got North Africa, you got Illyrium, and you also have Iberia, all kind of like festering with like problems. So that's where we'll begin.
Retreat to the north, but was chased by Domitius. With few options left, he had to abandon Sinope. Pharnaces then sailed to Bosphorus to raise another army, and even had some success before he was defeated and killed by Asander,
His stepson.
In response to the events in Bosphorus, Caesar appointed Mithridates of Pergamum, who was invaluable during the campaign in Egypt, the king of Bosphorus.
Yeah, his name makes sense with that area.
In the time Caesar had spent in Egypt and Asia Minor, the situation in Spain and Illyria had also improved.
Oh yeah, Mauritania is still a sovereign nation over there. Yeah, remember.
Lepidus, the future triumvir and current governor of Hispania Citeria, had intervened in Hispania Ulteria, stabilizing the region. Trebonius had been assigned to replace Longinus, who was dismissed and died in a storm while leaving the province. Meanwhile, another of Caesar's lieutenants, Vatinius, had gathered a fleet, and the veterans left in Brundisium who had been too sick to join Caesar in Greece to confront Octavius. The veterans had proved their worth, winning a quick naval victory over Octavius, securing Illyricum, and forcing Octavius to retreat to North Africa.
So already, like, Iberia is pretty much under control, Illyria is pretty much under control, so that you just focus on Sicily in North Africa.
With these areas secured, Caesar could now begin to turn his attention to the last remaining threat, the Pompeian faction in North Africa. But firstly, he was needed in Rome. Antony's governance had been disastrous, and Caesar could not afford to embark on another campaign with Rome in turmoil.
And this is what I remember, that Antony's really decent out in the battlefield. We've seen that a few times, but he's just not good at governing.
Caesar left the 36th and Pontic Legion in Asia Minor, ordering the 6th back to Italy, following them shortly afterwards. It is now late in 47 BC, almost a year and a half since the Battle of Pharsalus. Caesar had fought Pharsalus, intending it to be a final killing blow to the Pompeian cause, and while it had been successful in severely handicapping the Pompeians, it had failed to destroy them completely. While Caesar had spent the last 18 months campaigning in the east, the Pompeian faction had been rebuilding in North Africa. Leadership had initially been offered to Cicero, but he had refused, preferring
he's like the most modern of them,
to use his political talents to try and influence the Senate in Rome. Instead, leadership was split between Cato and Scipio. Cato was something of a natural successor.
And I think, of course, that he is probably one of the main instigators to this entire thing.
He had consistently been one of Caesar's most ardent opponents and wielded great influence and prestige in the party, but he had next to no military experience. To balance this, Metellus Scipio was appointed as the overall military commander. Scipio had a long political career and served as consul alongside Pompey in 52 BC.
And of course has a very famous name.
Had commanded an army in Greece against Domitius Calvinus and had commanded the center at Pharsalus. Despite these honors, Scipio had not really proved himself as a talented general. A number of his subordinates, most notably Labienus, were undoubtedly better commanders. Nevertheless, Scipio was given command due to his rank, prestige, and perhaps most of all, his name.
Yeah.
Thanks to Scipio Africanus and Scipio Aemilianus, it was rumored that no Scipio could be defeated in Africa. A new senate had been created in Utica, and a total of 14 legions mustered, 2 belonging to the governor of Africa, Publius Attius Varus.
So they basically positioned themselves almost like a Carthage in terms of geographics.
8 newly formed, consisting of local conscripts, as well as veterans who escaped from Iberia and Greece after the defeats at Ilerda and Pharsalus, and 4 of Juba's Numidian legions, who were armed and trained in the Roman fashion, plus a huge amount of Numidian light infantry and cavalry, and 120 elephants. Pompey's son Gnaeus had been sent to Spain to try and capitalize on the pro-Pompeian mutiny that had occurred during Longinus's tenure as governor, and there was a rumor that the Pompeian faction was planning an invasion of Italy itself. Caesar was aware of the threat, and had initially planned an invasion from both the west and east.
Well, my real question now is, like, in terms of naval capacity, what is the strength against strength here?
Longinus would land his Spanish legions and attack from the west, while Caesar would invade from Italy. Longinus's abysmal administration of his province had scuppered this plan, however. Caesar would need to invade himself, and without the reinforcements from Spain.
Darn.
Caesar's African War was about to begin. As Caesar returned to Italy from Asia Minor, he visited various client kings and rulers from in and around Greece, collecting money. Caesar had been recruiting massively throughout the civil war, spending almost all his personal money in the process, and the financial situation was dire.
He's really good at persuading people, you can tell.
Even with the money collected from these rulers, he still needed more. Upon his arrival in Italy, he borrowed huge sums from individuals and cities alike. Caesar likely had no intention of repaying these huge debts.
So these are donations.
But in his opinion, the money was being spent on the public good, and so was no different from an official tax.
He released the lower classes from all rent for a year, the 200 sesterces, and wrote off any interest on loans he had taken since the start of the Civil War. For the senators, he assigned a number of prestigious priesthoods and appointed more than usual of the praetors. For centurions, for centurions and officers of the army, he made many of them senators in order to bolster the very low numbers. So he packed the Senate, and he's adding more likely his party, what's one party system at this point, just adding, I guess, loyalists to the to his power spots like the Senate and what's it called, praetors
or levy. The money was given, but it cost Caesar popularity. Caesar was well aware of this fact, however, and worked hard to keep the people on side. Clearly, Caesar was well aware that to win any war, it is vital that the population at large is kept on side. There was one other major issue that Caesar needed to resolve before he could begin the invasion of Africa. 4 of his veteran legions left in Campania and picked to be part of the African campaign had mutinied a couple of months before Caesar's arrival in Italy. These legions had been campaigning continuously for 13 years and had been promised payment and discharge following the Battle of Thapsus.
Really?
Caesar's campaigns in Egypt and the East had delayed this, and with their general gone for almost a year, Antony had lost control, the legions going so far as to loot wealthy estates around Rome.
And I think another thing, I mean, this is true, disagree with me if you want to, and let me know why you disagree with me, but I think a lot of these people mutinying, obviously for those reasons, but more or less, they don't really have much transparency in what's going on. You know, a lot of times generals like to keep, just because there could be, who knows who's in your army at any time, right? You could have people that are going to defect, and they'll be traitors by telling the other side, or could be spies, or there could be, you know, it could be whatever. But basically, a lot of times, generals would not tell their subordinates where they're going, what the plan is. They might give directional ideas, but it's nothing to like to build on. So maybe, you know, in a general's eyes, there, and then like his number two, etc., they have more of an optimism or realism on what's going on. But it's the same old really for a lot of the people that's under you, because you really just can only go off of what just happened, not what's going to happen. So there could be, you know, high spirits if you want a good battle, but if you feel like you're in between a term and you deserve more, but you really don't know what's coming or when this thing is going to end, yeah, you're going to mutiny.
And even killing 2 senators who had tried to negotiate with them. As a result of his failures as governor, Caesar stripped Antony of his offices, instead assigning Lepidus as his master of horse and governor of Italy. 4 veteran legions presented a very serious threat if they could not be placated. Caesar recognized this danger and even garrisoned Rome. He was advised not to risk negotiating in person.
Didn't Caesar decimate like 10 people last time this happened? Pretty sure.
But Caesar knew that these men were some of his best soldiers and would be much needed in the campaigns to come. He met them alone at the Campus Martius. In reality, the legions were attempting to bluff Caesar, hoping that Caesar would not allow them to be discharged and they could then push for more pay. Caesar called their bluff and disbanded them on the spot, calling
That sounds like some heavy favoritism in the writing right there for Caesar. Unless he's just that dang good.
them citizens rather than soldiers. He promised they would all be paid in full and with interest after his conquest of Africa and subsequent triumph with other legions.
See? Then subsequent triumph. So it could be endless.
Caesar continued, allotting the men land from public holdings as well as from his own. Caesar concluded by saying, "I really have no further need of you, yet even so I will pay you the rewards, that no one may say that after using you in danger I later showed myself ungrateful, even though you were unwilling to join my campaign while perfectly strong in body and able to carry through all the wars that remain." The legionaries were stunned. They considered
he basically said, y'all weak.
themselves indispensable to Caesar and were shamed by how readily Caesar would use other legions to finish the war they had helped start, as well as by how generously and quickly he would reward them. For these men, Caesar was everything. They had become wealthy and famous under his leadership. Now they had attempted to blackmail him, had their bluff called, and were being put out to pasture. The legions then asked whether they could volunteer to join Caesar in Africa, but Caesar simply turned his back and began to walk away. Desperately, the men begged him to stay and
I mean, this just sounds like, I mean, I could see this happening. So you guys are telling me Caesar's the greatest chess player of all time?
re-enlist them. Caesar feigned indifference before agreeing to reinstate all but the 10th Legion. This legion was his favorite, and he made it clear that he was insulted that they in particular had joined the mutiny.
Wow.
Stung by his words, the 10th requested that Caesar decimate the legion, killing
What?
1 in every 10 men as punishment so that they might be taken back into his favor. Again, Caesar feigned indifference before relenting and accepting the legion back without punishment.
Okay. That sounded crazy to me. We are going to be willing to be decimated. I guess.
Caesar did keep a list of the leading figures of the mutiny and assigned them to other legions in particularly dangerous provinces, but overall it had been a brilliant success. All 4 legions were brought back into the fold without a sesterce being spent or a drop of blood shed. It was a prime example of the importance of the persona and personality of Caesar. No other man at the time could have spoken to the legions and reached such a conclusion.
We got some heavy glazing on Caesar, but maybe it's worthy.
With the legions once again under control, Caesar could finally begin his invasion, and he ordered 10 legions to gather in Lilybaeum, Sicily, around late December. Word had reached Caesar of the rumor that no Scipio could be defeated in Africa, and to counter these,
That sounds like something like like a legend of the day, like everyone's just saying it and it becomes like the zeitgeist.
he quickly found a minor member of the Scipio family to include in his officer's staff. He too now had a Scipio in his army.
So it's a rabbit's foot.
The veteran legions in Campania were still being organized for the campaign, but 6 legions were ready in Lilybaeum. 5 were relatively recently raised and untested. 1 was Caesar's veteran 5th Legion and some cohorts of the 10th, which had been stationed in Brundisium. Caesar was eager to sail as soon as possible, but the mutiny had delayed his plans, and he was now faced with bad weather.
We know how, going towards the land of Carthage and bad weather mixes.
Never one for waiting, he embarked his men and ordered them to Africa at the first sign of a lull in the storms. Caesar spent 2 days in Sicily, giving instructions for the rest of the army when they arrived on the island, before setting sail himself on the 25th of December.
Oh, Christmas.
He reached the African coast on the 28th of December, landing near Hadrumetum. In his eagerness to attack quickly, Caesar had risked the storms, and though most of his warships had managed to cross safely, many of his transports had been scattered, leaving him with just 3,000 infantry.
That's not a big army.
And 150 cavalry. Hadrumetum itself was under optimate control, garrisoned by 10,000 Romans and Numidians under the command of Gaius Considius Longus and Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso. Caesar encamped just outside of the city on the coast. His men's morale was low due to the uncoordinated crossing, and they were blaming Caesar because, in his haste, he had not issued clear, written and sealed orders to his lieutenants as he usually did. They were right. Caesar's obsession with being quick had this time backfired.
What do you guys think is going to happen? I think it's going to be a little bit longer, but they'll get it done.
Caesar was in a dangerous position. If the optimates sallied out of Hadrumetum, or if enemy reinforcements arrived, his small force could be caught against the coast. Initially, Caesar attempted to negotiate with Considius, but the messenger was killed and the message sent unread to Scipio. He had now spent a day and a night around Hadrumetum, and no more of his army had arrived. Caesar made some minor probing attacks on the city, but quickly decided he had
we got company.
Had neither the numbers nor amount of veterans needed to storm the city. To make matters worse, his scouts also reported that a large force of Numidian cavalry was closing in. With little choice left, Caesar broke camp and marched away from the city. As soon as he did, though, the Hadrumetum garrison sallied out, soon being joined by Juba's
So, now what?
cavalry, which had just
Feign a
arrived.
retreat?
They seized the deserted camp, and the Numidian cavalry began harassing Caesar's men, forcing Caesar to halt and form a defensive line. Clearly, this had been the optimate plan from the start.
So now we have a pitched battle.
Rather than attack Caesar in a fortified camp, where he was known to be particularly dangerous, they had waited for a chance to catch him in the open. Initially, it looked as though Caesar would be surrounded and caught, just as Curio had been years earlier. Unlike Curio, however, Caesar refused to allow his enemy to hold the initiative, ordering his small numbers of cavalry to charge the Numidians. Caesar was well aware that they did not have the numbers to win such a fight, but he was also aware that the Numidians would retreat and skirmish rather than engage in hand-to-hand fighting. It was vital that Caesar keep his men moving rather than stop and risk becoming surrounded, and with his cavalry having repulsed the Numidians for the time being, Caesar seized the opportunity, ordering his legions to continue their march with the few veteran cohorts and cavalry at the rear. His veterans could be counted on to stand their ground against the incoming missile
So we're literally just leaving at this point.
fire, while the cavalry would charge and scatter the Numidians. Though progress was slow, Caesar was able to continue this fighting withdrawal until he reached the safety of the town of Raspina on the 29th of December. Disaster had been averted, but Caesar was still in a precarious position. He next moved on to the town of Leptis on January 1st, where he was joined by some of his scattered transports. As well as his men being scattered, so too had his supplies. He attempted to forage off the land, but patrolling Numidian cavalry would ambush his men, making the task almost impossible.
So we kind of got like 2 coastal cities, and that's about it.
He sent requests to Sardinia, Sicily, and other provinces for more grain, and focused on consolidating his position. He left 6 cohorts in Leptis, 1 legion in Raspina, and took 7 cohorts of veterans from the 5th and 10th to the harbour, boarding his warships. He did not inform any of his men what his plan was.
Are they gonna go to Hadrianmentum?
But his veterans were confident that Caesar would have a winning strategy. In fact, Caesar's plan was to set sail with the veterans to find the rest of his scattered fleet. Caesar had not told his men this because he was nervous that the garrisons in Raspina or Leptis might be captured and reveal his plans.
See? That's what I was talking about. General doesn't hold, he keeps it close to the vest.
Clearly, Caesar was rattled and being cautious. Fortunately, the next day, a large number of the lost transports arrived, bringing much needed numbers. With this larger force, he could now attempt to forage in security. He made camp at Raspina, and then on the 4th of January, set out with around 15,000 men,
That's a big force.
approximately half his total force, to forage for supplies. After marching 3 miles from Raspina, his scouts brought news that the enemy was close and closing in fast. Quickly, Caesar ordered his small contingent of cavalry and archers to join him from Raspina, while he rode ahead with his bodyguard to confirm the information. In the distance, he saw a huge dust cloud approaching and ordered his men to prepare for battle.
Yep, this is the Numidian cavalry, isn't it?
In total, he would have 15,000 legionaries, 400 cavalry, and 150 archers.
Okay.
The optimate force facing him was significant. 12,000 of mostly light infantry, 8,000 Numidian cavalry, and 1,600 heavy cavalry.
Jeez. Now, how do you beat that?
Made up of Gallic and Germanic mercenaries, with a smaller force of a further 1,600 Numidian cavalry close by to reinforce. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect of the Optimate army, however, was its commanders. The main force was commanded by Caesar's once right-hand man Labienus himself, the reinforcements by Petreius. Labienus was undoubtedly the best general on the Optimate side, and his years of campaigning with Caesar had made him familiar with his tactics.
So this ain't no backyard rumble right here.
Petreius was also talented and experienced, having 30 years of military experience, including having fought Caesar at Ilerda and Pharsalus. This would be a difficult fight. Looking to make the most of his large number of cavalry, Labienus deployed his men in a long, tightly packed line, with infantry interspersed among cavalry in order to hide his numbers. On both flanks he stationed his heavier cavalry. Caesar, aware that he could be easily outflanked, stretched his line to have as broad a front as possible, putting what missiles he had in front and the small amount of cavalry on the wings. He kept his men in position, not wanting to make the initial move. With his smaller numbers and the enemy's cavalry advantage, he thought it best to be defensive. Labienus, on the other hand, used his cavalry to quickly seize the nearby highlands, at the same time forcing Caesar's cavalry to stretch thin to try and counter any flanking attacks.
Yeah, so like Caesar's cavalry is kind of like non-existent really at this point.
Labienus was well aware of Caesar's style of battle, which relied upon having room to maneuver and using terrain advantages, and had now denied these to him. With these initial moves completed, Labienus began the battle. he ordered his men to charge the length of Caesar's line, Caesar's legions countercharging at the last minute. As they did though, the Numidian cavalry fell back, while the infantry hidden among them pinned Caesar's infantry. The Numidians then skirmished back and forth, pelting Caesar's line with javelins. His men attempted to charge the cavalry to chase them off, but Caesar gave strict orders for his men to hold the line.
Dang, like they gotta have some discipline not to move. I mean, I bet you they are anxious.
Meanwhile, on the flanks, Caesar's cavalry, badly outnumbered, had been routed after a brief but brave struggle.
Now they're gonna get squeezed. It's gonna be they're gonna have to retreat.
Labienus now had Caesar's force entirely surrounded. At this point, Labienus removed
Caesar's gonna get captured if he doesn't abandon ship.
His helmet and rode around the surrounded Caesarians, encouraging his men and mocking Caesar's, attempting to demoralize them. He mocked them as being raw recruits and for being foolhardy for following Caesar and being caught in their current predicament. A veteran of the 10th Legion from one of the cohorts who had crossed with Caesar recognized Labienus. Removing his helmet, he threw his javelin, shouting out that Labienus would know he was being attacked by a soldier of the 10th. Labienus's horse was killed, and Labienus was taken from the battlefield after it fell on him. Nevertheless, Caesar's men were still struggling, attacked from all
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't know what else to say. That's crazy.
sides, and they could do little except protect themselves from the hail of missiles from the Numidian troops. It was a dire situation, and panic was spreading, and an Aquilifer even attempted to flee, forcing Caesar to grab him, turn him to face the enemy, and push him forward to the front. The day was coming to an end, and Caesar knew that he needed to reach his defences around Raspina before nightfall, or else lose his army. He ordered every other cohort to turn around, his line now fighting on two fronts, and gave the order for them to throw a hail of pila and charge in both directions.
Okay.
It is a testament to the training of Roman legions that such a maneuver could be organized and executed in the midst of battle.
Yeah.
Taken by surprise by this sudden attack,
Oh my god.
the Numidian light infantry and cavalry pulled back to skirmish and avoid hand-to-hand fighting. Caesar seized the opportunity and began withdrawing his forces from the battlefield as quickly as possible. As he did, Petreius arrived with his reinforcements. With these fresh troops, the optimate force pursued Caesar's men, looking to re-engage. This time, Caesar took the initiative, ordering his men to turn and charge their pursuers. Petreius was wounded in the skirmish, while the Numidians once again fell back, not
That's just crazy how just the bait and switch feel with that.
wanting to be pinned in melee. This time, Caesar continued to push them back over the high ground. Caesar paused his men here, wanting to see if the enemy would attack now that he had the terrain advantage. The optimates were exhausted, had both commanders injured, and had inflicted as much damage as they could in a day. They each withdrew to their camp, Caesar's men also withdrawing to Ruspina. The casualties for both armies are not known, but given the encirclement of the Caesarian troops, it is likely they suffered more than the optimates. Caesar had very nearly lost the entire campaign. If Labienus had not been wounded, he may have been able to better control the optimate army and keep the pressure on Caesar, leaving no chance for him to escape. But Caesar was saved by his own strategic talent, his men's training, and luck with the wounding of both enemy commanders.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, Caesar had managed to avoid having his whole army destroyed, as had happened to Curio. He would be able to consolidate and seek a more favourable engagement later.
That's what we're gonna stop today. Really, I think these chapters kind of threw me off. I think this kind of like, can't remember what happens after this, but I think that's the Battle of Raspina, and one of these was the Battle of Hadrumetum. I can't remember which was which. We definitely watched two battles technically, and of course what led up to the things that were going on in Illyricum, as well as Rome and other places. Guys, thank you guys so much for being here. We got a little bit more to go, probably about half of the video to go now. And then after this, we're going to talk about Augustus and what happens with post-Caesarian, spoiler alert, Rome. Appreciate you guys being here as always. I will catch you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.